Welcome to the Interstate Mets Report with your hosts, Nelson and Chris.
What is up, everyone? It's the Interstate Mets Report, episode number 38, titled Where My Dawgs At? Because we have some exciting prospects to get into today. We'll be talking about the latest prospects, but for those of you all who are watching right now, you might notice there's someone different on my screen, and it is not Mr. Nelson, aka Amish Country Mets fan. We are missing him today. He had some prior commitments. He'll be back on with me next week. But we got my guy Talking Mets with Rob here of the Mets Hot Stove Lives. He has his own YouTube channel. We all do the Mets Roundtable podcast together. He was very kind to take some time out today on this lovely Friday evening. Thank you so much, Rob. How are you doing? And welcome to the Interstate Mets Report, man.
Absolutely, man. I'm doing good. I'm glad I'm filling in for Nelson here, helping you out a little bit on the Interstate Mets Report. So I'm glad to be here. Let's talk about Mets, buddy.
Absolutely. Let's talk some Mets baseball. You know where to find Rob. Like I said, a lot of you all who watch this Interstate Mets Report also watch Rob's channel. You know where to find him on both X and YouTube. Subscribe to the channel, follow the channels, all that good stuff. And while you guys are checking us out today, make sure you drop a thumbs up on both the streams. This stream is going to Nelson's YouTube, my YouTube, and Rob's YouTube as well. Hit the thumbs up on all streams and comment your thoughts and opinions in the live section. We already got a lot of comments in here. We got Robert checking out the stream here. We got Sanders checking in the live stream here. And we got John and Daniel here as well. Thank you all so much for the support. Now, let's get into today's topics. Here are some news around the league from when you last saw us last week on the Interstate Mets Report. We have our news at the top and some available bats at the bottom. And the reason why I wanted to lump these two, topics in the same category on the same screen here is we see the bats at the top, and we'll get into the relievers here and David Robertson and Matt Moore in just a second. But we see Rhys Hoskins and we see Joc Pederson signing with their respective teams. A lot different of the deals, the type of deals that they got in terms of the money perspective. And this has a little bit of a correlation on the latest report about the Mets potentially, and I use quotations surrounding that. We all know how this offseason has gone for the New York Mets, and I still don't see a signing happening in terms of the DH category, adding a bat, but you have the market now set in terms of these bats. Rhys Hoskins, who just came off of a brutal ACL injury, got $17 million per with the Brewers in comparison to Joc Pederson's $9.5 million with the Diamondbacks. Rob, how do you assess this market, and how do you think this impacts the Mets, if at all, in terms of going to, go out and still look for that bat that they desperately need, unless, like I said, and I've been saying all this time, they might go with Vientos. But if they want to add externally, how do these deals influence the Mets?
Well, I think you have to look at it in one way. I think the market's coming back to the teams. I think teams that probably talk to these players like Rhys and Joc over the last, I would say, month and a half, they probably wanted more money and more years. I think Joc Pederson could have easily got 14, 15, $60 million. He's still a good bat, DH bat, could play a little bit of the outfield if you need him. Rhys coming back from that major ACL injury, getting 2 years, $34 million is not a lot of money for the Brewers and not a lot of money for Rhys Hoskins. And I'm surprised he got the 2-year deal. But I read something on a Philly radio newsletter or something like that about a week and a half ago that Rhys Hoskins wanted the 3-year deal, or at least an opt-out in the third year. And it just shows you that the players are coming back to the market and coming back to teams now and probably taking less money, less years than they originally wanted. And I think that's a good sign for the Mets if they are looking to acquire another bat or maybe a couple of bullpen arms. Joc Pederson, under $10 million. That's right in the Mets budget. I mean, I don't think a lot of Met fans would have been excited about Joc Pederson signing, but there were a couple of Met fans that I know on my channel that really wanted, would say, hey, let's get Joc Pederson. He's a decent bat in the lineup, can play multiple outfield positions. I just see the money-wise, I think the money's coming back to these players. They don't exactly like what they're hearing from these teams, and spring training being only 2 weeks away, players want to get settled. And, I think you're going to see a lot over the next week really, really start to come off the board. And hopefully, in our case, as Met fans, the Mets go get a bat or go get at least an arm for the bullpen, because the money looks like it's going to be a lot more on the favor side of the teams, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree with you. There's something to be said about this market in terms of playing that waiting game and for the opportunity for the Mets to sort of come back in and swoop in on that market. And for those of you all who are listening to this, if you don't know, the recent report from SNY today actually highlights John Heyman, who I believe works at the New York Post, basically saying that the Mets are back in the conversation about considering, again, I'm using those quotations, signing a bat. And if in his opinion, if the Mets were to make a splash in any sort of way, it would be in the offensive market. And that's per John Heyman. So take that with a grain of salt. All of these reports that we've been having to go off of this offseason, you have to take with a grain of salt. But it's just interesting to me when you see a guy like Jorge Soler coming off of an all-star season, 36 home runs, an OPS well above 800, right? What is he going to ask for and demand when you see a guy like Jock Peterson, right, who had a down year, 15 home runs, hit 235 with an OPS below 800, versus a Rhys Hoskins who got 17 million per that didn't even touch the field in 2023? What realistically, given those two signings, would a Jorge Soler expect? Now, per that article, I don't know what splash means. I don't know what potential splash means. I don't know what definition that means to John Heyman, but I still don't see any sort of way the Mets going after Jorge Soler. If those 3-year reports are true, and given what these two guys got at the top of your screen and what he's potentially asking for, Rob, do you think it's feasible for the Mets to go out there and get Jorge Soler? Or are you still on, I guess, the mindset of the Mets going internal here?
I think it's a lot more possible than even I thought about a week ago. The only reason why I say that is because of the fact that if he would have been offered a 3-year deal from another team, he would have been off the board already. And clearly, teams are not offering 3-year deals for Jorge Soler. And to be honest with you, it's because I think we talked about this on the roundtable on Mets Hot Stove a couple of times, is that when he doesn't hit home runs in a year, he's not a very good offensive player. And, he had really good seasons, but there's years where he hits 16 home runs, 20 home runs, nothing special. And I think people are worried about what if that Soler comes back. And I think the problem with Soler is the fact that, he had a really good season for the Marlins. And, he opted out thinking he would get a 3-year deal, probably for a little bit more money per year. And now that he already opted out, he's kind of, between a rock and a hard place here. And I think the problem that he's looking at, and I think it's going to benefit the teams, is that nobody's probably willing to give him more than a 2-year deal. And that includes the Mets. And if the Mets are smart, and we hope they are with David Stearns, it would be a bad sign if Jorge Soler signs a 2-year deal somewhere for whatever amount of money. I don't think the money really matters. It's probably going to be between $15 and $20 million, I would assume. And if he goes for 2 years, I would say 2 years, $38 million. A lot of Met fans are going to be pissed off about that. Is he going to get more per year than Rhys Hoskins? $17 million per year? You would think, since he actually played last year. But You just never know. Rhys Hoskins is a decent first baseman who can be, he's probably going to be their first baseman, for the Brewers. Soler's not going to be your everyday outfielder. So are you going to pay 18, 17, $19 million for just a DH who is not a very good defensive outfielder? I just feel like I think it's possible only if it's a 2-year deal. That's why I think the other two options that you have on the bottom of your screen are probably with Turner and Martinez more likely.
Yeah. And for those of y'all that don't know, I guess Jorge Soler, the other team that's been heavily reported in on Jorge Soler is the Toronto Blue Jays. So at this point, we just don't know. Like, we know he started off his expectations with 3 years. We don't know if at this point in time, on January 26th, we don't know if that expectation has dropped. And like you said, my concern with Jorge Soler is not his plus side ability to hit 30 plus home runs. I know he can do that pretty easily, but it's, does he stay on the field? Because we've seen in the first 10 years of his career, we've only seen upwards of 30 home runs twice in those 10 years. Although those years were right from 2019 on. So I guess relatively recently, and especially last year, had a pretty decent year in 2021 as well. I think hitting 24 home runs collectively. But can he stay on the field? That's my concern with Jorge Soler. And that's why I don't want to turn this potential 1-year deal or 2-year deal with an opt-out maybe after the first year into a 3-year deal for Jorge Soler. That's where I get a little bit squirrely. And I think that's where a lot of people also that are not as high on Jorge Soler, that's the breaking point for them, as opposed to maybe a JD Martinez and a Justin Turner. Now, obviously, you have Matt Chapman has the qualifying offer attached to him. I don't think he's likely. Honestly, I just threw his name out there just for, shits and giggles at this point. But Adam Duvall, another guy that the Red Sox have been prioritizing and re-signing. Also, probably not on the forefront of Mets fans' minds. We want to see either one of these guys on the top 3: Jorge Soler, Justin Turner, or JD Martinez. And we've said this before, and we've talked about this before. In case Jorge Soler is out of the picture, if it came down to Justin Turner and JD Martinez, you all know, if you've been paying attention to the Interstate Mets Report, if you've been paying attention to our Hot Stove Lives with Hayden, myself, you, and Nelson Rob, on all of our channels, you would know that I'm a big proponent for Justin Turner. I think overall, who he is as an overall hitter and the flexibility that you get on the defensive side of the ball, even though he's 39 years old, is something that plays directly into the Mets' strengths, knowing that you'll only have him for 1 year and he'd be a bridge type DH for you, probably going to go back out there in 2025 in that offseason and upgrading your lineup at the DH spot. But a lot of people are high on Jorge Soler and JD Martinez over Justin Turner. If it came down to Justin Turner and Martinez, and say Jorge Soler and everybody else is out of the picture, who are you rolling with between those two guys?
Justin Turner. And there's 2 reasons for that. Justin Turner might be the oldest one, but actually he's been more healthy than the other 2. And, Soler misses games. Martinez misses games. Martinez has a chronic back issue. Soler has multiple injuries over the last couple of years as well, who has been injury prone in his career. Justin Turner, even at his age, plays a lot of games. And, he's not going to play 155 games. I understand that, but I love the fact that the run production without home runs is what's appealing to me. Soler and Martinez, if you look any year that they didn't hit 30 plus home runs or even hit 25 plus home runs, their run production is way down. So a lot of their RBIs, a lot of their run production is from home runs. And again, home runs are sexy, right? Chicks dig the long ball. That's what people love, right? But in my opinion, I need a guy that is a run producer. And Justin Turner doesn't need to hit a home run to produce runs. He's a gap-to-gap hitter. He's a guy that I feel comfortable with runners on, runners in scoring position. When he's at bat, he's going to get that runner in because, look, he hit 24, 23 home runs last year. He had 96 RBIs. Unless he hit grand slams every single time he was up at the plate, it shows you that he was a run producer. He gets on base. He hits the ball. He puts the bat on the ball no matter what scenario it is, but he's dynamic with runners in scoring position. And Justin Turner makes the most sense. But I do understand when it comes to JD Martinez, why people want him, because we've been hearing his name connected to the Mets for 3 seasons now. And Soler is just, the guy that we've seen in our division. And, he burned us a couple of times. He has 36 home runs. We understand that. But Justin Turner, I think, is the perfect guy. And I think it's more risky to give Justin Turner a 2-year deal. But I think if you have to get him, and that's the guy you really think is probably the best option for that, I think you have to give him a 2-year deal. I wouldn't want to give him a 2-year deal, but I would bite the bullet in that aspect because I would rather have him on a 1-year deal because he is 39, but he's been more healthy than the other 2 at the top of the list. And I just like the fact that run production-wise, he doesn't need to hit a home run to be productive, in my opinion, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree with that. Like when I look at a DH, the home runs are great, and Justin Turner has 20 plus home run capability, but that's not the end all be all when I assess a DH that's going to be behind Pete Alonso, presumably for protection. Now, like I said, we're getting into this conversation. We're delving too deep into it because I still think the Mets are going in the internal route with Mark Vientos and that platoon with DJ Stewart. All signs and what David Stearns has said in his quotes point to that fact. But this little nugget out there that got thrown out by John Heyman today, or SNY, whoever it was, right? It was SNY quoting John Heyman saying that the Mets could potentially still be considering, again, I'm using quotations, Mets fans, this is offseason is full of quotations, and we need to take it with a grain of salt. But that is my sort of thought process and logic behind it. But like I said, Jorge Soler, he has great upside. Are we going to see that consistently, especially with the expectation of his deal? And also, I think there's a lot of recency bias with Jorge Soler. He's coming off of that all-star season where he hit 36 home runs, but let's look at the longevity of his career. Can he stay in the field? Is he going to provide the Mets anything beyond just a potential 30 plus home run season? He's not even a lock to do that. For me, the answer is no. And that's why, unless it's a 1 or 2 year deal, I'm not going in that realm of 3 years. And if he wants 4, forget about it. I don't think he wants 4 because he'd be crazy to even ask that, but forget about it. So that's what I'm kind of getting toward with Jorge Soler. And you're right, he's a strict DH. He's a strict DH. And that's what Rhys Hoskins is not. So I can probably sort of like deduce why he got 17 million without even appearing in 2023 because he's going to be playing in the field. So this is just interesting to sort of get that market and get that feel for what Jorge Soler and these other guys are in the market for and what they could potentially be getting here soon as we see the market start to slowly creep up and heat up. Guys, we got a lot of people in the chat. I appreciate everyone in the chat. This is the Interstate Mets Report going live on every Friday. When we get into the season, we'll be going live on both Tuesdays and Fridays. My guy here, I know it says Amish Country Mets fan, but it's not Amish Country Mets fan. It's Talking Mets with Rob. Make sure you go check him out. Show him some love on X and YouTube. You know where to find him. Just want to highlight a couple comments here. Just want to support everyone that's supporting us. We got Darnell in the chat. Shout out Darnell. We got Ryan, Mets fan, saying Jorge Soler sucks. See, I wouldn't go that far, but like I said, he wouldn't probably be my first priority if he still wants those 3 years. But shout out Ryan for being here nonetheless. We got Steven with the question. Hey, Rob, what do you think of the 24 alternate black jerseys this year without the white on them? Yeah, it's a very big talking point amongst this Mets fan base. Do you like what we see more this year or with that white outline that we see on the jerseys?
Well, you know, I grew up in the 90s and the late 90s when they had the black jerseys with the white trim. And you know, the most recent ones, yeah, I love them, but I don't hate them. Like, I want to see them in person before I bitch and moan about it, because you only seen, you know, you saw the SNY put it up there. I want to see it on the field, on the players. It always looks better on the players, to be honest. But yeah, I don't mind. And you know, and they also talked about the April 26th on a Friday with the City Connect jerseys. And, you know, I know they always release them on Fridays, but, you know, that's a black jersey night for the Mets at home. So I'm very curious to see, not only are they taking the white out of the black jerseys, the trim, but they're also doing a City Connect that they'll be wearing Fridays as well, or on the weekends, I'm assuming as well. So I think a lot of Met fans who don't like the black jerseys, which there is a few, and I have a best friend that I hang out all the time and go and travel with all the time. David, if you're watching, I travel with the 7 line all the time. He hates the black jerseys and would never wear black at all, no matter if it's Friday night or not. And I think if the City Connect jersey is somewhat relatable to the black jerseys that came back a couple of years ago, I think it's going to piss off some people, because the City Connect jerseys have been horrible for the most part. I think the best one is the White Sox with the South side and the black white pinstripe. It's pretty cool.
Fire.
Yeah, those are one of the best ones. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going crazy. Look, as long as they don't change the colors to, like, you know, purple and pink, or, you know, something crazy that's not Mets related colors, I'm not going to go crazy, to be honest.
Yeah. I'm gonna be honest with you. This is the last statement I'll make on the jerseys, because I just think it's a pointless topic, but it's fun at the end of the day, especially when we have this type of off season. I love the black jerseys. I always have, and I always will. I'm a big proponent for them. Do I like the white trim more? And I'm disappointed they took that away. Yeah, I am, because I just think that's like more visually appealing. But nonetheless, I'll never crap on a black jersey. Those are fire. I love it, and I hope they're here to stay. We got AP here asking where Amish is. He has some prior commitments. He could not be on the screen with us here. So shout out to Amish. Make sure you're subscribing to all 3 channels. Subscribe to Nelson's YouTube channel as well. All those will be in the link in the description down below. All those links. Rob's channel, my channel, and obviously Nelson's channel. Subscribe to all 3. We do some great work. We hope that you guys are enjoying. We work hard to get you all this content. We definitely appreciate the support in return. It means a lot to us. We got Keith in the house. Y'all, make sure you're subscribing to Shay & Sons. They're going live tonight at 9:20 p.m., I believe. If you got nothing to do on a Friday night, even though I do, I will be tuning in. Go out and check out Shay & Sons on both X and YouTube. Get them to 300 subscribers. They do some great work, and they definitely deserve it. Shout out, Keith, for checking in with us. Much love. Yeah, much love, man. Shay & Sons, great work. Absolutely great work. Yeah, Hawaiian Fridays. You know what I got to do here. I got a question from my boy, That's My Sports, Aaron from That's My Sports. Go check out their podcast about the Hawaiian Fridays. We got to do it. Love it, love it, love it. Appreciate y'all checking us out. Shout out Rube, you as well. Thank you so much. I appreciate the support. Okay, now moving on to the next topic here. We saw the DH market. We talked about the bats. Honestly, I'm not going to lie to you. If I had to assess this offseason and what we see from now to the end, I think it's a reliever or 2, then we're done. Like I said, I think it's going to be Vientos and Stewart. For better or for worse, that's up to y'all's opinions. I think Vientos can be 25 plus home runs if he gets consistent at bats, but he's not going to be that protection for Pete Alonso, and it just is what it is at this point. Let's move on to the reliever market. You see here David Robertson, familiar friend, David Robertson. I'm not going to lie to you all. I thought that a reunion was definitely possible. He gets $1 more million, $1 more million a year for the 1 year than what he got with the Mets to sign in the beginning of 2023. He signs with the Rangers for 1 year, $11 million. Like I said, this would be a risky signing, even if that were the case, if he was coming over to the Mets. I thought that the fit was there and potentially being that setup man in front of Edwin Diaz. But let's face it, he didn't look like the same reliever, the same David Robertson that he was in Queens when he went over to the Miami Marlins. The walk rate went up. I'm not sure. There's just a whole combination of things that was going wrong for David Robertson. So he inks a deal with the Texas Rangers, and I honestly wish nothing but the best to David Robertson because he was a great Met, and I have no doubts in my mind. I think he even said it when he was getting traded that he loved his time, his brief time in Queens with the New York Mets. And obviously, familiar topic of here, Matt Moore, lefty, one of the lefty names we've always been talking about on our Mets Hot Stove Live, signs a 1 year, $9 million deal with the Los Angeles Angels. Now they have Robert Stevenson, the righty, who the Mets were also linked to, as well as Matt Moore going over there to help that Angels bullpen. We're going to transition here into this bullpen market, the names that are still left available here, right? Obviously, we just talked about the guys who signed and that are off the market, right? We just recently saw Aroldis Chapman. We just saw Robert Stevenson go off the board, and we saw Matt Moore go off the board. Here are the names at the top that are still available. Obviously, you have your top guys at the top for a reason. Hector Neris and Wandy Peralta are probably some of my favorite relievers still left on the market. But at the bottom of your screen here, you see that the Mets have been linked to and have been interested in Ryan Stanek. Like I said, interested. Where do you assess this? I dropped a Ryan Stanek video on my channel going over the last 3 years of sample size that we've seen from Ryan Stanek. Honestly, you don't know what to expect out of Ryan Stanek, to be honest with you. The last 3 years, he's been all over the place. ERA was like 3.7 in 2021, had a historic career year, posting a 1.15 ERA in 2022, his career year on that World Series winning Astros team. And then most recently, in 2023, he got absolutely shelled 4.09 ERA, was a shell of what he was in 2022. Like I said, 4.09 ERA is what it is, but I'm saying in comparison to what he put up in 2022, that's a very large discrepancy that we've seen across those 2 seasons. So we really don't know what to expect. But I will say this, because I have been an advocate for Ryan Stanek in this bullpen. I think he's in the market for a short-term deal, given his down year in 2023. I think that he can be a great asset to pair that electricity that we now get back with Edwin Diaz in the 9th inning. He can be the perfect setup man for Mr. Edwin Diaz in the 8th inning, because honestly, the way that the bullpen is shaking out right now, relying on Brooks Raley to be your elite setup man and your lockdown 8th inning guy is a no-go for me. I like Brooks Raley, but he's a lot better suited off in my mind in the 7th inning than he is in the 8th inning. What do you think, Rob? What do you think of Stanek, and what do you think of these names still left available on this market right now for the New York Mets to go out there and potentially pursue?
Yeah, I also did a video about Stanek yesterday, and I brought it up about, his career year in 2022, and then a really good year in 2021. And 2023, I don't know what happened. It's just one of those bullpen years that you see from almost every bullpen guy. Hector Neris a couple of years ago were, wasn't very good. People, he was getting shelled, and then now he's looking like the best reliever still on the market. So with Ryan Stanek, I like him a lot. I like the fire. I like the passion. I like that he doesn't back down. He goes after hitters, and we saw that video that's running around X, that him cursing out the Dodgers and pointing at them, and like that's the type of fire we need. We need a badass on the mound, and I think all these guys that are listed, look, the top 2, I would definitely want either one of those. I think Neris is probably out of budget or range for the Mets at this point, but
for a 3-year deal as well, yeah.
Yeah, Peralta, I really like. I want another lefty. Even though I like Stanek, I think it's more important to get another lefty in this bullpen than to get a guy like Stanek, who is, let's be honest, a hit or miss, like you said. He can't be a setup man, even though I think he's a perfect setup man, just passion, fire-wise, and his stuff. He's a flamethrower, which David Stearns likes. He has a slider, he has a splitter, and if you look at all the signings that Stearns made in the bullpen and minor league deals, he likes those type of pitchers that has, a nasty slider and uses and has splitters as well. And I think the fact that Stanek has those pitchers is nice, but I talked about this. The Mets bullpen is at its best when they have 2 lefties. Only because Raley is important. I think a guy, like you said, a 7th inning guy, he can pitch against righties or lefties. We need a guy that's a lefty that can get out any type of left-handed hitter at any moment, depending on the circumstance. That's why I would probably focus more on Peralta, but it seems like more and more Peralta might be heading back to the Yankees, most likely. But look, am I going to complain that they get Stanek? Absolutely not. Throwing 97 to 99 with his fastball, Mets didn't have that much in their bullpen at all. And I think, look what Stearns is doing. He's getting guys in here that have high velocity fastballs, sliders, and, secondary, tertiary pitches. I think you should have signed Ryan Stanek at this point, because I don't think the Mets are going to try for anybody else at this point. I think because he had a bad year last year, the money might be coming down. The years might be coming down. I mean, if he was a free agent at 2022, he'd probably get a 3-year deal, 4-year deal, maybe, close to, I wouldn't say like $100 million, but maybe 60, maybe what Hector Neris is looking for now, maybe a little bit more. But can you get him on a 2-year deal? I think he's a guy that is probably more around the 3.35 range ERA wise. Because if you look at his whole career, it's around the 3s, 4s, around that. And besides the last couple of years, besides 2023, I think he's the type of guy that could be a solid setup man. Again, you don't need him to be perfect, but being the bridge to Edwin Diaz, we saw how good it was with the Aaron Loop or Ottavino. That was extremely important, because when the Mets went into their bullpen in 2022, you were fairly confident later in games because of the couple of guys they had that they bridged to Edwin Diaz, and the Mets are lacking that right now. Jorge Lopez, yeah, he could be that guy. I don't trust it, but I'd rather have Jorge Lopez coming in the 7th, really in the 6th or the 7th with Jorge Lopez, and having a guy that is a badass. Let's be honest. And Stanek coming in the 8th inning. So, in my opinion, sign him. How much he's going to cost? I think you can get him on a 2-year deal, probably around, I would say what Moore got, around $9-10 million, maybe a little bit more, maybe 12. I would say like 2 years, $24 million. I think that's probably the max the Mets would go. Probably not much more than that, but bring Stanek here. Let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, 2 years. If there's an opt-out after the first year, that gives him an opportunity to prove himself that he can return back to that 2022 version of himself. So I know that we like to throw opt-outs around, and maybe Stanek just wants the job security in terms of getting that second year with no opt-out. But I think that makes sense for him. Being 31 years old, he gets the 2 years and opt-out after the first year, gets to prove to everybody, and like you said, test that free agent market again in 2025 and get that bag that he definitely could have gotten if he hit free agency at the end of 2022. That makes a lot of sense for me. And like you said, 3-pitch reliever. He's got an explosive fastball, 97 to 99 miles per hour. Just an overall fiery and electric pitcher at that. His splitter, slider, off-speed combo. The splitter is a lot better than his slider. I think we'll start to see a lot more discrepancy in those pitches because hitters were hitting 188 on his splitter in comparison to 269 on his slider, and the slugging percentage was north of 500 on that slider in 2023. Like I said, Stanek has swing and miss potential, but he also has a lot of, I guess, just a concept of when he gets hit, the ball is going to go a long way. He struggled with the home run ball last season. He struggled with the command, the walks a little bit. So there's a little bit of give or take when you take into consideration Ryan Stanek. But at this point, if you're the New York Mets, in this bullpen outlook, right, and Jorge Lopez and Brooks Raley potentially, I guess, appearing earlier on in the game, and you reserve your 8th inning for a guy like Ryan Stanek, and he can really be that shutdown guy before Edwin Diaz, your bullpen looks a lot better with him in it than it does without. And I think that's an obvious thing to say. You can say that for pretty much anybody on this list, right? Even if they go out and get him Adam Ottavino, which I don't want to happen. But I think there's a case to make where this bullpen might look a little bit better and a little bit lengthier, because at that point, the key name that you really take away in that aspect is you see a lot less of Drew Smith, which I think we can all agree that we want to see a lot less of him in 2024. And I think that this is really his last year to prove himself to the Mets and to this fan base that he has what it takes. Nothing more, nothing less. If it were up to me, he wouldn't even get this shot to begin with in 2024 because he's been so brutal. But like I said before, he has the stuff. He just doesn't have any command to go along with it. So, like I said, this is the bullpen. You got a lot of other names here. You got Adam Ottavino, who is a veteran in this league. You got a Colin McHugh also, who has done relatively well for the Braves. He's 36 years old. I know the Mets want to get a little bit younger, but he's on the market. I think MEZ in the chat was saying Shintaro Fujinami. He had a really down 2023, but, we know his command issues, but he has the stuff to be electric if, I guess, Jeremy Hefner in this pitching lab can help him out. So a lot of names left to be had in this bullpen. Like I said, no matter what the position group is, it doesn't matter if it's DH. It doesn't matter if it's a starter, because I don't think the Mets are in line for another starter. But just in case they might make another move for a starter or the bullpen, they are not going beyond short-term deals for these guys. They have a plan, and they're going to stick to it unless, like you said, the market comes back around to them on maybe a Jorge Soler or any other reliever like a Hector Neris who's struggling to find 3 years somewhere else. Maybe the market circles back around to them the second time around, and then they can say, okay, we will outbid you by a couple $1 million, or this team by a couple $1 million if you come to Queens and play for us and put on that uniform. So all valid points, and I think that the bullpen is a lot more likely to be upgraded on right now if you're the New York Mets. And like I said, the DH situation is what it is. I know I'm just repeating myself here, but if I'm the Mets and if I'm anyone in the chat here asking about any sort of DH options, I really think that you ought to just, I guess, get ready for Mark Vientos, to be honest with you. I'm sorry. I hate to bring that up. I know we're on relievers. I hate to circle back around, but it is what it is at this point.
Yeah, and I think
honestly,
sorry to cut you off. I know somebody in the chat, I forgot who it was, said between Vientos and Stewart, if they can hit 35 home runs combined, that's like one DH, whoever one of those guys on the list, Yeah, I understand that, but I mean that means you got to put him in right situations as well. Can Vientos hit right-handers? Is he going to be a left-handed platoon? Just against left-handed pitching, is Stewart going to be just a DH against right-handers? In my opinion, platoons don't work. I said it for years that it was very apparent. I think in 2022 when it came to it was the Brewers and then Oakland that the Mets faced, and Vogelback had a really, really probably his best stretch as a Met in 2022 against the Brewers, and then they went to Oakland and they played Oakland 4 times and they started 4 lefties, and Vogelback, as hot as he can be, sat on the bench for Darren Ruff and others. That's why I don't like the platoon. Give me a guy that can hit righties and lefties. I hated that. I was so pissed off. I was live during a couple of those games, and I was so pissed off. The hottest hitter in the lineup was Vogelback after that Brewers series, and he sat his ass on the bench and was basically a pinch hitter later in the game when a righty came in. And when you sit on the bench, you get cold. Especially when you're red hot, you don't want to sit. And I think that's the problem with the platoons and why I don't like it. If you're going to give Vientos a job, give Vientos a job and let DJ Stewart be the 4th or 5th outfielder, in my opinion. I think that's the only way it's going to work.
2 things here. That's exactly what I've been trying to preach for the last couple of seasons. The Mets, whether it's the manager who makes the decisions, which I highly find it hard to believe, right? I think it's the analytical department making that choice from up top. I hate when they play the matchups. If you have a hot hand, stick with them and ride it out. There's just something to go for having analytics dominate the game versus just passing the eye test, right? And I think that there needs to be a combination of both. And I've been trying to stress that all along as well, but it just seems like the Mets are so stuck in this. And I get it. Analytics help. I'm not going against the analytics. I'm not, because they do help in certain situations. But there is an aspect of letting a manager do his job and allowing him to put the right guy in the lineup, even if that means it's a righty on righty or lefty on lefty. It's not always concrete that a lefty is going to have more success against a righty. There are splits to look at, and there's also just an eye test to feel for who has it versus who doesn't. And the manager's job is to walk around and get a feel for that in the pregame and all the other time spent with his players. And I wish that part of the game would come back, but I think that is a little bit far behind us now, which is unfortunate, right? And yeah, I think Chris also is fact-checking me here. Honestly, I didn't even see this. This is so random. And I should have done my research, honestly, before.
I'm actually looking at it right now. I didn't even know that. I thought Colin McHugh was
I didn't even know that.
He retired.
He posted a pretty decent couple seasons for the Braves that he just dipped at he's 36 years old. I don't know, man. I know personal situations and all that, but that's shocking to me, honestly. We got Joseph in the chat. Thank you so much for checking us out. I appreciate it. I appreciate Stoney being here as well. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone in the chat. Thank you for dropping the comments. Like I said, hit that thumbs up. This is being streamed to all different platforms, both on X and YouTube. Subscribe to everyone's YouTube channel. Myself, SCPNY Sports, Talking Mets with Rob, and Nelson. All of those are going to be in the description down below. Like I said, thumbs up, subscribe, all that good stuff. I appreciate it. Okay, let's move on here, because I think that we have to have a little bit of a different conversation this offseason in terms of filling this roster internally now instead of just externally with the slow news that we've been hearing surrounding the free agency. I dropped another video. This was just yesterday, last night, talking about these 2 guys, and Christian Scott and Mike Basil, on my channel, talking about their 2023 overviews, the type of seasons they had, and how they could potentially fit into this rotation moving forward. Listen, Rob, we've been talking about this on the Mets Hot Stove Live. Nelson, myself, you, Hayden, everybody. We realize that we have a full 2024 season ahead of us. But when you look at the rotation contractually and what sort of contracts and free agents are going to be present at the end of 2024, it becomes very evident that the Mets are going to have the same problem in terms of needing to fill in that rotation behind Kodai Senga in the 2025 offseason, and not only this offseason in 2024. Because we have a rotation that's pretty much set, right? Going forward into 2024. We have Senga, we have Quintana, we have Severino, Mcneil, Hauser, and whoever you want to deploy as your 6th starter, because I think we all agree they're going with a 6-man rotation. But nonetheless, Let's take a look at this. Severino, free agent on a 1-year deal. Adrian Hauser, free agent coming over from that Brewers trade. He's going to be a free agent. Joey Lucchesi is going to be a free agent. Jose Quintana is going to be a free agent. Sean Manaea, if he does well, right, he got that 2-year deal with the player opt after the first year. If he does well, he's going to be opting out and going to free agency. I can guarantee you. So the only pitchers that you have contractually on your roster in 2025 when looking at it, and I know this is a whole year away, I understand that, but it's important to realize when we're talking about prospects like Christian Scott and Mike Vasil, the only for sure contracts that you have on your roster in 2025 in the rotation is Kodai Senga, Jose Butto, and Tyler McGill. Now, I want to say David Peterson as well, but I got to fact check myself. I haven't looked at his actual contract, but nonetheless, it's not good behind Kodai Senga. This quote from Will Salmon says it all. The Mets know this. They're foreshadowing this. They don't give out 1-year deals and trade for an expiring contract like Adrian Hauser without having a plan for who's going to backfill this rotation before next offseason. This quote says it all. Will Salmon, in his latest article, says, quote unquote, ideally, the Mets want an internal option or two to step up before the organization makes plans for the 2025 rotation. What does this quote say to you, Rob? I'm curious.
Well, it's saying, let's hope and pray to God, at least Christian Scott or Tidwell or, in this case, Vasil, become parts of this rotation. Now, you don't need Vasil to be a number 2. I mean, it would be great if he would be, but if he can be a solid number 3 or definite number 4, that helps your rotation. That's one less, depth piece in your rotation, or at least, a back end guy in the rotation you have to get next offseason. And Christian Scott is the one that people believe that he can be an ace or a number 2. And they're hoping for that. They really are hoping for that, because I tell you this, they're banking, or at least they believe in the front office believes, David Stearns believes that at least one of these guys are going to be in this rotation that are really going to help the rotation in 2025, because if not, are they going to what if Christian Scott, not injury wise, but doesn't have a good season, not ready for the big league? What if Vasil, does make the team or is just in AAA not doing very well? Well, then what do you do next offseason? You're going to have to do exactly what you did this offseason, but you're going to have to spend a lot of money and a lot of years because you got to fill your rotation. You're going to need a number 2. There's better pitchers next year than there is this year, but that comes back to the offseason that makes no sense this year, because is Blake Snell or Jordan Montgomery only for this year? That's why when he's like, it doesn't fit into their plans. Well, yes, it does. It should fit into their plans because of the fact that what are you going to do? Because not only do you have to worry about your rotation, you got to worry about your first baseman being a free agent. You got to worry about going after Juan Soto and God knows who else. And look at all the bullpen arms that are on 1-year deals as well that are going to be free agents as well. So not only got to get more bullpen help, you got to get rotation help, and you got to sign your own, plus go after the biggest free agents bat-wise on the market in Juan Soto. Are they really going to do that in 2025 and spend $1 billion like the Dodgers did? Because if that's the case, then hopefully one of them. But if they're going to spend that type of money, make a trade for a Tyler Glasnow type or something like that. That's the problem that I'm having with this situation, is that if they're really worried, or at least planning on having one of these guys or both of these guys in the rotation, if both of them end up in the rotation and they're pretty good, then it saves them a lot of trouble next year, because they can just take one of the best available on the market and sign them as a free agent, whoever that may be. And then, now you got 3 or 4 pitchers in your rotation, and you only got to worry about depth pieces. And that's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is, as I just said, both of these guys don't turn out, at least this year, in the minors, and they're not ready to come up in 2025. Now you got to sign at least 2 big names in the rotation, maybe one, and trade for a number 2 or a number 3. And then you got to spend a ton more money for your lineup. That is Beatty going to be there? Is he going to be good? Because you might be looking for a third baseman. You might have to hope Acuna or Jet Williams pops up and helps you out there, because clearly the Mets are going to go after Juan Soto and do everything they can to sign Pete Alonso back. And that's what, $500+ million just for those two guys, most likely, maybe more, in total contracts, maybe even $700 million, depending on how much Soto gets. So I think it's a bad plan because of the fact that if you're not going to sign one of these top guys in the market now, which saves you the trouble next year of hoping and praying that one of these guys turn out, so you don't have to get, that big time free agent pitcher, they're setting themselves up for a huge problem, because unless Steve Cohen says, look, 2025, it's an open checkbook, doesn't matter the cost, then who cares? But we don't know that, right? We assume that because that's what they said, and they have been following their plan as of right now. I hope Christian Scott or Mike Vasil turn out to be guys that you could just throw in the rotation. They have good seasons, and then, the plan's falling into place. But do they have a plan if that doesn't turn out? Because that quote says it all, right? The organization makes plans for the 2025 rotation. So I do think that they have a plan B if these two don't, or at least one of them don't pan out. They have a pivot plan that they really don't have this year. I think they have one plan and they're sticking to it. They better have a plan B, because if they don't, they're going to be spending well above $1 billion to field the team in 2025.
And that's where like you have to talk about trades in that scenario as well. And that's why I dropped on my channel. I dropped that potential 2025 offseason trade of Freddie Peralta and Christian Yelich coming over to Queens in a hypothetical trade to kill two needs with one stone and one trade. And those are the sort of, I guess, moves that the Mets are going to have to make, because it's not feasible to go and fill a whole entire rotation behind Kodai Senga if these prospects don't pan out all through free agency. But I think that they do have a plan, and they should. If you're going to go after one-year deals in the rotation like a Sevy and a Mcneil on short-term deals and not invest this offseason, you better have a plan for next year in the offseason in case these prospects don't pan out. Now, like I said, that's where the ideally part comes in. I think that word is very important at the first side of your screen here. In the very first, the very first word of the sentence is very important. Ideally, that means that they probably have two options, but that also means they need to give these guys on your screen a chance, right? They need to give them a chance in 2024, because if you just leave them to rot in AAA or AA for the entirety of 2024 and they continue to struggle, well, you'll never know what they have. You'll never know what they can produce at the major leagues. And I understand that it's something to be said for not rushing prospects, but honestly, this situation is a very weird one in terms of the Mets' rotation when we're looking at the outlook of this season versus next season. Now, I will say this doesn't mean that that Severino can't go out there and kill it in 2024, and he's not a re-sign candidate, being only 30, 31 years old in the prime of his career. A lot of people are underselling Luis Severino in terms of having a bounce back year. I personally think so. I get the ERA was north of 6.5 last year. I get he has his injury struggles, but if the Mets are able to tap into that actual potential that he has, that we've seen already with the Yankees in years past, then we're talking about a different conversation, and that helps the Mets out a lot going into next offseason. But you're going to have to see basically one, if not two of these guys up on the major league roster. Now, Eloise over here saying that Eloise Gums, he or she, I'm not sure exactly. I can't see the picture, but thank you for tuning into the stream. Joey Lucchesi should be considered for the rotation. I absolutely agree with you, Eloise. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And I think that we're going to see him be that sixth man in the rotation come opening day in 2024. I really do think that. But when you get to the latter part of 2024, what happens? Right? Because we don't know if they're going to want to have Joey Lucchesi slot into the bullpen after a little bit. We don't know that. Maybe, maybe not. But how are you going to realistically get a Christian Scott or a Mike Vasil up without moving him to the bullpen? or without moving an Adrian Hauser elsewhere. Like, they need to work around the roster right now because it's a little crowded. They put themselves in a unique position here. So when do you foreshadow either of these guys making their debut? That's my question to you, because honestly, I can't see it by opening day. I can't see that happening. But it has to be at some point in 2024.
Yeah, sorry, Chris. Yeah, and that's the point. Like, they're signing all these 1-year deals. You're not signing these 1-year deals to sit on the bench and not pitch these guys. Like, you Severino's in the rotation, Hauser in the rotation. You know, these guys that are on 1-year deals, those guys are going to be in the rotation. You're not signing them in 1-year deal and making them collect money and not do anything. Joey Lucchesi, if he was a big part and if they trusted him actually to stay healthy as well, because he wasn't healthy either, that's the other problem you have to look at as well. You know, if they thought Joey Lucchesi was going to be a part of this rotation, or at least going to be almost a guarantee to be one of the 5 or one of the 6 men in a rotation, they would have got one of these guys that are on a 1-year deal. They probably wouldn't have got him. So the fact of the matter is, they probably don't trust either Joey Lucchesi pitching every 5th day and staying healthy. I think that's the other thing. I understand with Luis Severino and, you know, guys like, you know, like that, and I think Luis Severino is going to be fine. I think last year was an anomaly. If you look how the Yankees pitched him and how they played games with him on the IL, I think he just checked out, to be honest with you. If you look at every year that he pitched, even when he was injured and came back and pitching 18 to 20 starts, he was a 3 ERA type of pitcher. If you have a 3 ERA pitcher in your rotation, I mean, look, the Phillies didn't have anybody that pitched under a 3.5 last year. So, you know, I look at it this way. The fact of the matter is that the Mets have depth, no matter how you put it. If you want to put in a young kid, if Basil's ready, you want to put him in the 6th spot, fine. Joe, the fact of the matter is they're 6, 7, 8 deep now. And what you don't want is have the majority of your rotation hurt. And you got to use your 6, 7, 8 guys as your 2-3 pitchers. And that's when you're going to fall into trouble like the Mets did last year. So I see it as this. And Eloise, he also said that, you know, if it was left up to us, young players would never have a job other than in the minors. Here's the problem.
That's not what I'm saying at all.
Yeah. No, we're not. But the fact of the matter is that as a big market team, you're not counting on those guys you're not counting in the majority of your minor leaguers to come up. Wait a second. Did you forget about Pete Alonso? You forget about Mcneil? You forget about Nimmo? You forget about Beatty? You forget about Alvarez? Those guys were from your farm system. At some point, you got to put guys around them as well. And that costs money. And we forget that. And I think that's the problem. What the problem was for the last couple of years with the Mets, when Pete Alonso and Mcneil were having good seasons, you're wasting those years away, and it gets closer and closer to their contracts where you had to extend Nimmo, extend Mcneil, probably extend or re-sign Pete Alonso. You got to put guys around them. You can't just say, oh, well, Jet Williams is coming up, Drew Gilbert is coming up. We can put guys around them, you know, put those guys around the guys that are already up here. But they have to pan out. You can't wait for Drew Gilbert to pan out in 2027, even if he's up here next year. If it takes him a year or two to really get solidified as a major leaguer, you know, now Pete Alonso is 34 years old. Now Mcneil is 35. Lindor is, you know, creeping up to the middle of 30. And then what? Now the guys that you expect to come up and put around those guys, the Gilberts, the Acuñas, the Williams, yeah, now they're up here, but those core guys that you already have in your team are getting older. So if they're going to be declining with age, now you have to replace those guys at some point. And that's going to be a problem in their production if it doesn't stay the same. And guess what? Now you get, what are you going to talk about in 2027? Oh, let's wait for, you know, the guys that are 18, 19-year-old that the Mets just signed internationally, or their draft picks. That's what you're going to be waiting for. You can't go through that cycle. You're not the Baltimore Orioles. You're not the Tampa Bay Rays, right? Yes, you want your farm system to be replenishable if guys like, you know, a bullpen on. Like, if you look at around the league, right? The Braves are an anomaly, right? The Braves can't spend big money, so they rely on their farm system. If those guys that unfortunately for Mets fans, all those guys that they brought up from the farm system panned out. That's not normal, especially all those position players. It's not normal. Now you can talk about development and everything like that. That's what the Mets are trying to pull up. That's what they're trying to figure out, and that's only the start of what they're trying to build here. And in 2 years, they became the middle of the pack farm system to a top 5 farm system in 2 years, just based on drafting quickly and the trades that they made last year. That doesn't happen either. It takes 4, 5, 6 years to build a top 5 farm system when you're nowhere near that. They did it within 3 years, 2 to 3 years. And that speeds up your timetable here. But are you not going to get Juan Soto next year because you have Drew Gilbert and Acuna and Clifford? Possibly that could be your outfielders in a couple of years. They already moving Nimmo to left field. So are you just not going to go after Juan Soto because you got Gilbert, Clifford, and Acuna? Or even Jet Williams for that matter? I mean, you're not going to do that because they are question marks. They're called prospects for a reason, right? I always talk about Lessons Millage. Everybody loved him. I remember him at Shea Stadium when he hit the big home run going down the right field line, smacking everybody's hands, and then that was it. That was his career as a Met. And I know that's you look at that and then you can say, oh, well, look at Pete Alonso. Yeah, but not everybody's Pete Alonso. Not everybody's a Brandon Nimmo. You hope they are, but when you're a big market team, right? Are the Dodgers are using their farm system more for trades as assets than they are bringing up every single guy, because they do have Mookie Betts. They do have Freeman, right? Now they got Yamamoto. They got Ohtani. They're not just relying on their farm system on the field. They're using their farm system as assets to get Tyler Glasnow. How did they get Mookie Betts? They got him through building up their farm system and using those assets to trade for Mookie Betts. That's what the Mets are striving for. And I can guarantee you, everybody can't be on this team. All these prospects, you can't put them everywhere. You can't have 11 guys on the field like softball. You can't do it. So at some point, if it's going to be Gilbert, Acuna, Williams that are the untouchables, then everybody else should be an asset to make a trade to make this team better over the next, either this year at the trade deadline or in the coming years to come, Chris.
Yes, and I agree with that. And that's assuming that we can trade those middle infielders. Presumably, that's the strength of the Mets' farm system for pitching talent, right? But just to go back on Eloise's comment here, saying pitchers will inevitably get hurt, and that will create opportunities for guys like Scott and others, which I definitely do agree with. Unfortunately, injuries are part of the game. They're part of baseball. They're a part of every sport. That will create opportunities. Is that the way that I would like for an opportunity to be created for these guys? No, but inevitably, in any case, I think that we see both of these guys in 2024 at some point. Mike Vasil, like you were saying, Rob, doesn't need to be that 1A guy, that ace or that second tier guy in the rotation. He needs to be a 3, 4, 5, somewhere within that range consistently at the major league club. We haven't seen that in AAA. The disparity between the AA numbers and the AAA numbers last year in 2023 were something that concerned me. The walks when he got to AAA haunted him. There was a lot more walks per 9 innings, up to like 4.7 in comparison to below 2 for Mike Vasil. That needs to get cleaned up, and I think he'll eventually be fine because he has the electricity on his fastball. He has the off-speed stuff to strike batters out. He just needs to hone in on that command. And big frame, 6'5", 225 pounds, the Mets have a nice, I guess, frame right there to work with in order to get those mechanics right and see him succeed at the major league level. And Christian Scott, same thing. He probably throws a tick harder than Mike Vasil. He has the off-speed stuff as well, and we've seen him be a little bit more consistent than Mike Vasil. That's why a lot of people have jumped the gun in terms of realizing that Christian Scott may very well be our best pitching prospect, and I think a lot of people are still holding out hope for guys like Dominic Hamill, Tyler Stewart, Blade Tidwell, but right now, these two guys that are probably the most readily available to get called up to the 2024 rotation, I think of the two, I think we can understand that Christian Scott has a little bit more upside than Mike Vasil. That's all I'm going to leave it at there. Just food for thought with these topics in terms of these prospect debuts, a little bit of a refreshing sort of topic when we've been talking about free agency and who or who not the Mets might go after in this free agency. That's just a ton of question marks surrounding it. We got Pastor Steve. We appreciate you checking us out. Be blessed, young man. Enjoy your family and friends. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Pastor Steve, for checking in with us. We got Darren in the house, supporter of the stream and the channels. I appreciate you, Darren. Like I said, this is being streamed to all 3 YouTube channels. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up. I definitely appreciate it. And going on to our last topic of the day, because we're just about an hour in and we got about 10 minutes left here. Let's talk about Jeff McNeil's comments in the latest interview that he did on the Foul Territory show, and you can find it on YouTube. It's a great show. Todd Frazier was on it as well. I believe it was AJ Przinsky that was on it interviewing Jeff McNeil, but nonetheless, here at the bottom is an obvious quote, but it's just sort of interesting, and we talked about it before we went live here about how he views his seasons and his success and what he measures his success by. Jeff McNeil says, I expect 300 out of myself, right? Presumably he's talking about himself every year. I think that's good for me. Last year in 2023, obviously he hit 270. It wasn't his worst year, he said. He thinks that 2021 was definitely his worst year. But the most interesting thing about this whole entire interview was we all know how good buddies he is with Pete Alonso. They're always hanging out. They're probably, from what I see from the outside fan perspective, those guys are some of the closest guys to each other on that Mets roster. He says, and I quote directly from Jeff McNeil's mouth in this interview saying, I know he wants to be a Met, talking about Pete Alonso, and we all want him to be a Met as well. I know he loves New York. That is, like, I could make this, we can blow this up out of proportion, which I don't want to do, but this is pretty huge because all this time we're like, well, is Pete Alonso really just telling the media that he loves New York, or is he actually being genuine, and does he actually mean it? Well, according to Jeff McNeil, it's very genuine. We've seen Pete Alonso hanging out in the offseason in New York. He likes New York, right? He's built a foundation here for himself and his family, presumably, right? What do you make of this all? I mean, it's hard to just take these quotes for something that maybe they're not. I don't know. It's I don't want to blow it out of proportion, but I guess this is at least positive for the Pete Alonso fans out there that want him to be re-signed, right?
Yeah, and this is the first time that you're hearing an actual player in the offseason. You heard it, during the season, though, yeah, we want him to be here, blah, blah, blah. But hearing one of his best friends in the offseason, say this is a good sign. But, his last sentence was, I know he loves New York. There's also another team in New York who will be looking for a first baseman this offseason as well after Rizzo's gone. And I know that's, worst nightmares for, Mets fans, but he did hire Scott Boras. There's a reason for that. I seen Aaron Judge. I seen players take a little bit less money for the team that they're currently were on before to remain at the team that they're on, to take a little bit less money to remain on the team that they were on. Pete Alonso is not going to do that. You can want the Mets all you want, but you're not giving them a hometown discount. I'm not saying give them 3-year discount or $10 million discount, but even the best player in baseball, Aaron Judge, took less money to go back to where he felt the most comfortable, and that was with the Yankees when the Padres and the Giants were offering more money and more years, and he still took less money to go back to the team that he was originally on. Is Pete Alonso going to do that? How much does he love the Mets? You'll know, because if the Mets offer him 8 years, $275, and the Yankees offer him, 9 years, $300, he loves New York, right? I mean, he doesn't have to move, right? There's your problem. How much does he really love the Mets? That's when you're really going to find out, because if he takes less money to come back to the Mets because that's where he knows, then, hey, the comments were true. What he said all along, Pete Alonso, was true throughout the last couple of seasons. Wearing the I Love New York, batting gloves last year, that's awesome. But it didn't say I love the Mets. It said I love New York. And we have to remember that as well, that there's another team over there that is going to be looking for a first baseman as well, along with other teams. You know, who knows? The Giants might go big. The Cubs might go big. We heard it for years about the Cubs with Pete Alonso. So take it with a grain of salt with this comment. I like it that it's from one of his best friends on the team, but he did hire Scott Boras. So clearly negotiations aren't going well at the moment. So, and Scott Boras is a guy that, you know, puts everything on the table and does not care about, you know, how his player feels about a team, how, you know, how fans feel about a team. He is going to use the Mets fans, and you're gonna see this offseason. Boras will use the Mets fans as the biggest pressure point for the Mets to re-sign Pete Alonso. And maybe that's a good thing. Absolutely. Maybe it's not. He is going to use every bullet he has to make sure he gets the most money. And if it's not with the Mets, it's not going to matter to Boras. And it's probably not going to matter to Pete Alonso. Because the Mets aren't the highest bidder, I don't think he's going to be a New York Met. And I don't think that is the worst thing, because overpaying, yes, you want to overpay for certain guys. And you could say, oh, you can, you know, throw the checkbook at Pete Alonso because, you know, he's your guy. That's understandable. But if it stops you from adding to your lineup, like Juan Soto, if you're going to sign Pete Alonso and he's somehow, you know, if the Cubs offer him $300 million for 9 years, are the Mets going to match that? If they do, great. If 2025 is what they say it's going to be, money shouldn't be an issue. I do wonder if the Mets are going to go above and beyond where they feel comfortable. Remember, this ain't Billy Epler, who is not afraid to throw money around. This is David Stearns, who is more methodical in his budget, in the way he, you know, gives contracts out. I don't look at this year and saying, oh, all these one-year deals is what he's going to do for his career. I doubt that. But David Stearns is known, you know, you can't really tell because it's with the Brewers, who had no budget. You know, is he willing to match an offer that is astronomical for Pete Alonso? Because that's going to be telling. And if Pete Alonso is not going to take a little less money or a year less to come back to the Mets, well, he really didn't want the Mets. He just wanted to get paid end of years. And that's okay. Look, that's their right. Free agents are free agents. But if he chooses the Yankees over the Mets for a few $1 million more, he really didn't want to be a Met. He wants to be in New York. And that's the way I see it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that makes a complete sense. But at that point, they probably wouldn't be able to sign like a Juan Soto anyways, right? Because they have Juan Soto hitting free agency, and then you're going to go after Pete Alonso. It's not really serviceable. So if that's a little swap there, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but at least you have a backup option in terms of that power bat. But nonetheless, it's good preliminary news, right? Like you said, it's good to hear that coming out of his teammates' mouth, especially Jeff McNeil, who we know that they're close together. But I can't really blow this out of proportion. I can't take this anything past face value. I'm going to take this with a grain of salt because like Rocky was saying, you can't really trust what they say. And honestly, what was not shown here, what I didn't pull out of the excerpt, they asked what Jeff McNeil's piece of advice would be to Pete Alonso going through this process, and Jeff McNeil already going through this process in terms of getting that contract extension with the Mets. And he said his main advice would be to wait. And I'm like, well, you don't want to hear that if you're a Mets fan, but we know that he's going to wait anyways. Like these Scott Boras clients in this offseason, if this offseason is a telltale sign of what's to come with Pete Alonso, they're going to wait to the last possible second and let someone come in and outbid the New York Mets. So expect that. I don't expect an extension at this point to get done this offseason. If I get a notification on my screen saying breaking news, Pete Alonso has re-signed an extension with the New York Mets before opening day, I would love that. I would love that. Give me that all day. But do I see that happening? I don't, and it's unfortunate. And that's what I'll leave it at. But like I said, it's fun to talk about these last two topics in terms of the Mets pitching prospects and these latest Jeff McNeil comments. A little bit more of a refreshing topic than the free agency that we keep on sort of speculating on whether they're going to pull the trigger on these free agents this offseason. Like I said, this has been the latest edition of the Interstate Mets Report. Rob, that's all I had for us today. Final words out of you. Let us know what you're doing on your channel as well, where people can find you if they may not already subscribe to you, follow you on Twitter, all that good stuff. Let everyone know final thoughts about this Mets team before we head out of here, and enjoy the rest of our Fridays and weekends. Like I said, shout out to everyone in the chat. Appreciate you all being here.
Absolutely, Chris. I thank you for having me on. I'm glad I can fill in for Nelson, the GOAT of we all know how he is, loving his topics, his opinions, and all that fun stuff. So he will be back again. I'm just a replacement for today, but subscribe to the channel, Talking Mets with Rob, TMWRNYM on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. I'm finally going to be doing a prospect video soon on the channel, so look for that in the coming days. And of course, I'll be going live, Mets Hot Stove, Chris, Nelson, Hayden, all of us, we'll be getting that started back again, probably either next day or two. Hopefully the Mets get a bat or maybe an arm. How about signing somebody? Make us talk about something instead of repeating ourselves, and give content creators a chance of new topics. So again, Chris, I appreciate it. Subscribe, hit that like button, guys, and let's go Mets.
Yep, absolutely. Let's go Mets. You know where to find us as well on at Interstate Mets on X down below. Make sure you're subscribing to everybody's channel, Rob's. Make sure you're subscribing to Nelson's YouTube as well, at Amish Country Mets Fan. And lastly, myself at CPNY Sports, True Mets Talk, Interstate Mets, Mets Hot Stove Live, Mets Roundtable, all of that good stuff on all of our channels. We definitely appreciate the support. Thank you all so much for bearing with us. Hit that subscribe button. It's the point of the offseason where it's like a fishing rod, a fishing reel, or we're just getting hooked in and sucked into these latest reports that might not have anything surrounding them and backing them. So bear with us. We're trying to do the best we can, and that's why I want to talk about the Jeff Mcneil comments, the prospects coming up, and it's going to be great to see that prospect video come up on your channel as well. And most recently, me talking about Christian Scott and Mike Vasil on my channel. Like, that's the sort of things that we now have to look forward to in terms of seeing these young guys potentially come up with the mixture of free agency and trades heading into not only this season, but the next offseason as well. Rob, thank you so much for taking some time and filling in for Nelson. I definitely appreciate it. Nelson will be back on with me next Friday. Our usual time. Today was a little bit later, but we'll probably be going next week between 3:30 and 4. So make sure you subscribe. Follow us all on all our social media handles. Like I said, this is another episode of the Interstate Mets Report. If we get any breaking news between now and the rest of the offseason, we'll definitely be going on the live on both of our channels. We'll set something up. We'll go live and talk about a potential signing or trade or whatever may happen. But let's hope that it happens first and foremost, because we need that to happen for us to do that. Like I said, this is another episode of the Interstate Mets Report. It's your boy, CP. I definitely appreciate it. With my guy, Talking Mets with Rob here. We are out. And happy Friday. Peace.
Thank you for watching the Interstate Mets Report. Streaming Tuesdays at 5 p.m. and Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to at Amish Country Mets Fan and at CPNY Sports.